All right, important background info. September 1944. Things are not going well for Germany in World War II at this point. On the east, they have the Soviet Union Red Army closing in, and on the west, they have the Allied forces closing in as well. At this point, the Allied forces have already stormed the beach at Normandy. They've retaken North Africa. They've retaken France and Belgium, and now Allied forces are right up on the German border at the Siegfried Line. It is Germany's last line of defense, their western wall, almost 400 miles of dragon's teeth, tank traps, mines, barbed wire, and it's all covered by over 18,000 concrete reinforced bunkers with artillery and machine guns. And it is the advice of almost every high-ranking German officer that Hitler should order his men to hunker down and defend throughout the winter. But Hitler has a different idea. Hitler wants to do the exact opposite. He wants to go home with the girl that he took to prom, so to speak. Hitler got here by being overtly aggressive. He attacked Poland, and then he launched the Blitz to take over France. He attacked quickly and violently to a degree that nobody had ever seen before, taking everybody off guard. They literally called his tactics the Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War, and he wants to do that again. Rather than playing defense and waiting for the enemy to come to them, he wants to go to the enemy.
It works the first few times. A blitz like that, especially when you catch people off guard and it's a surprise. But once they know their enemy, that shit doesn't work the same ever again. Cuz now they know it's coming. They're ready for it.
To launch,
and they're used to this tactic by now.
A major offensive, and the German military only has one left in him. This is an all or nothing strategy, and if he fails, the war is essentially over, but that's not going to deter him. You see, along the Western Front, you have the British and the Canadians in the north, and you have the Americans in the south, and it is Hitler's strategy to launch another Blitzkrieg-style attack right down the middle, splitting the British and the Canadians from the Americans, separating the Allied forces. After splitting the Allied forces, he wants to drive the Canadians and the British to Antwerp, essentially pushing them up against the sea, creating another Dunkirk-type situation, forcing the British and Canadians to surrender, and then he hopes to broker a peace deal with America because America won't want to be the only Allied force left fighting them. Assuming that plan works, he will no longer have a Western Front to defend, and he will be able to divert his entire military to the Eastern Front to combat the Red Army. This is a Hail Mary. This is an all-or-nothing strategy, and the Germans need everything.
This is assuming every single thing goes according to plan. This is assuming America reacts to this in a certain way. This is assuming the Allied forces react to this in a specific way. There's a lot of shit. There's a lot of room for failure with this.
Front to combat the Red Army. This is a Hail Mary. This is an all-or-nothing strategy, and the Germans need everything to go right if they want any chance of success. They need the weather to comply, and they need the element of surprise. Because of this, the entire offensive is going to need to run on a very tight timetable. Once they invade and knock the Allied forces on their heels, they're going to need to keep them on their heels the entire time until they've won. If even a single German unit gets hung up or delayed, it could throw off the timetable, allowing the Allied forces to regain a foothold and launch a successful defense and maybe even a counteroffensive. And that would essentially bring an end to World War II in the European theater with the Nazis losing. The crazy part about a strategy that's this big and this time sensitive is that it could be just one small contingency of men led by one officer that's willing to fight to the bitter end that could set about a chain reaction that would bring about the end of the entire Third Reich. And what's even crazier is Hitler would probably never even find out that dude's name.
I have a secret, and you have to decide if it's true or false.
We will not work with a serial killer.
Oh, yeah.
Lyle Bouck was born on December 17th, 1923 in Fenton, Missouri. He grew up during the Great Depression with 5 siblings. His father was a carpenter, and as I'm sure you can imagine, there wasn't a whole lot of new construction going on during the Great Depression, so he grew up in what many of us would consider to be soul-crushing poverty. Luckily, ignorance is bliss, and young Lyle was just a kid. Whatever he experienced was normal to him. He had no idea that it was irregular for a family that large to live in a one-bedroom home with no electricity and no plumbing. He didn't know that it wasn't normal that nobody was full after dinner and that all the siblings would go out to eat dandelions and wild berries for dessert. But as he got older, he started to fully understand his family's situation, and by the time he was 14, he wanted to help. So he went and he enlisted in the Missouri National Guard, where he would be able to make $1 a day every time he had drill. In the Army, Lyle's basically a prodigy. He's incredibly intelligent, he's great at everything he does, and he grew up some poor depression kid eating dandelions in his backyard, right? There's nothing the Army can do to him that his childhood hasn't already done, and he deemed his childhood as a good time. So all of of this is just fun to him, no matter how much it would suck to anybody else. By the time he's 16 years old, he is the supply sergeant for his entire unit, and in December of 1940, as World War II is starting to heat up, America has not entered the war yet, but it's looking like we're gonna. They're starting to draft people. His entire reserve unit gets activated to go do a bunch of training. So Bouck and his unit are down in Texas and Louisiana. They're training for a full year. They go from December 19...
Damn. A full year. And he said that he got $1 a day while training? Or maybe like once you get activated, you get a bump in pay, maybe. Even then, even so, even still, $1 a day for 365 days. That'd be something great to send to your family, especially in those times.
1940 till December of 1941. Early December rolls around, they're getting ready, they're packing their shit, they're gonna go back home. They've been gone for an entire year. Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, they're not going home. They get told, congratulations, your active duty has been extended indefinitely.
Hey, kids, what's going on? War! We're going to war!
Don't worry though, it gets better. You see, the Army in its infinite wisdom is like, okay, we've got this group of National Guard guys. They've been training for a full year. They're ready to go. They've been training in Texas and Louisiana. They're used to the heat. They're acclimated for the desert and the jungle with extreme humidity. Okay, where should we put them? And the Army's like, the Aleutian Islands, aka fucking Alaska, which is just brilliant. Okay, so Bouck's unit is gonna get sent up to the Aleutian Islands because they're concerned that the Japanese are now going to attack the West Coast, and one of the first places they would attack would be the Aleutian Islands, so they're basically gonna be there ready to fight the Japanese if they come. So at this point, Bouck is like, I would rather do literally anything else. So he goes and he volunteers for OCS school, and he volunteers for this new sketchy job called being a paratrooper.
For those of you that don't know, OCS school, OCS stands for Officer Candidate School. So he's going from being a supply sergeant to now he's about to be an officer.
And OCS school gets back to him first, which is the officer training course. He gets shipped off to school to become an officer. So Bouck ships off for Fort Benning. He's going to end up being an infantry officer. He goes through the course, graduates top of his class. He does so well, they end up retaining him and not shipping him off to war because they're going to use him as an instructor to train a bunch of more recruits that are coming through. So he actually ends up doing that for a year at Fort Benning, training small group defensive tactics for the infantry. So a year goes by, Bouck is 19 years old. He gets orders to go down to Camp Maxey, Texas.
And ain't nothing to fucking do at Fort Benning at the time. I don't even know if Columbus even existed back then. But yeah, that place had to have been boring as hell on your days off.
He's going to be joining the 99th Infantry Division before they get ready to ship off to combat. He's not really sure where they're shipping off to yet. Nobody knows if they're going to the Pacific Theater or the European Theater, but just judging on the fact that they're in Texas where it's warm and the European Theater is about to go into winter, it would make sense that he was going to the Pacific Theater, so he's starting to mentally get himself ready for that. So he gets down to Camp Maxey, and at this point in the war, it's like 1943, so most of the younger officers, Bouck's only 19 years old, he's a first lieutenant, and most of the junior officers that are young are all what's called a 90-day wonder, which basically means they pluck some kid out of college, sent him to officer training school for 90 days, and turn him around and sent him into combat to lead men into battle. So being called a 90-day wonder is like a derogatory term. It's definitely not.
Yeah, that's awful. That's absolutely awful. That is sinful. Hold on.
Junior officers that are young are all what's called a 90-day wonder, which basically means they pluck some kid out of college, sent him to officer training school for 90 days, and turn him around and sent him into combat to lead men.
Ew. 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 This is like one of the first times I've had to pause so far in the video. That is awful. That would be terrible. Oh, absolutely not. I would not like that in the slightest. I would be upset. Because, man, if you're a veteran, you understand, dude. But in these times, man, you were drafting. But at the same time, though, still, that's awful. That's really shitty, especially for the men that are being led. You're being led by a kid who was told, hey, drop your fucking books, you're gonna do this shit, and, I feel like you should make officers out of the ones that join that want to be there, right? Because there's nothing worse than having someone in a combat zone that's supposed to have your back that doesn't want to be there. And I get it, you know, obviously no one wants to be there, obviously, but you know what I'm saying? As per draft stuff, I would promote from within for officers, man. I wouldn't draft for an officer because And then it's 90-day training. That's it, man. That's crazy. Hell no. My officer, my fucking PL went through more than that just to become an officer, and I still didn't take anything that he had to say into account because he had never deployed before. This motherfucker didn't know anything. But
into battle. So being called a 90-day wonder is like a derogatory term. It's definitely not a compliment. It's basically everybody in your chain of command being like, hey, I respect the rank you have on your chest, but also I have zero faith in your ability to do absolutely anything. So that's kind of what everybody just assumes Bouck is. He's so young, they look at him, 19-year-old kid, first lieutenant on his...
He was the exception, but again, we ain't talking, I'm talking about the majority of the time that, yeah, that's...
Chest are like, 90-day wonder. In reality, Bouck has 5 solid years of experience already at 19 years old. He is one of, if not the most experienced junior officer in the United States Army at this point. His chain of command realizes this and they give him a more important task. He ends up getting tasked with standing up and creating...
Who would have thought that the guy that had prior service as an enlisted member would shine as an officer? Because that's the one thing that he has that the others didn't. Those fuckers, they just got plucked right out of college. They probably didn't have plans to join the military, right? But, yeah, imagine. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that... Duh.
The INR platoon, the Infantry and Reconnaissance Platoon for the 394th Infantry Regiment of the 99th Infantry Division. Now, an INR platoon at this point is what we today would call a scout sniper platoon in the infantry. Basically, they take some of the better or the best infantry guys available from the entire regiment, stick them inside of this platoon, and they learn different tactics because they have a completely different job from the rest of the infantry. Their job's going to be going out behind enemy lines, surveilling the enemy, gathering intelligence, potentially capturing other enemy scouts, things of that nature. Bouck is basically told, hey, here's access to all the personnel files for the entire 99th Infantry Division. Pick your top 18 guys. You got to have 2 squads of 9. So he immediately goes through all the personnel records, starts picking guys out. His criteria is you have to be either a high school graduate or currently going to college. You have to have an IQ of 110 or higher. You have to be a qualified expert marksman with the M1 Grand, and you have to be physically fit. So he goes, he gets like a list of like 50 names, goes around talking.
That is some solid prerequisites. I like it. However, I don't know where I would fall on an IQ test. So, that's neither here nor there.
3 of the men fall out. He's got his crew of 18. And from here, Bouck uses the rest of the time he has stateside to train the holy hell out of these 18 guys. Remember, he was an infantry instructor at Fort Benning for a year. This guy knows how to train people, and now he is overly committed to 18 people specifically. He makes them do the hardest obstacle course at Camp Maxey every single morning. By the time they get done with training and get shipped off to war, this group of 18 is an excellent team, and they are in phenomenal shape. And then one day they just get told, hey, pack your shit, head to the train yard, you're shipping off to war. They don't even tell these guys where they're going. Now at this point, you gotta remember, it's like late 1944. The Allied forces are dominating over in Europe. The German army's on its last leg. They've got the Germans pretty much pushed all the way back into Germany, and they're just manning the Siegfried Line, okay? So everybody's kind of hoping they're going to Europe, but also everybody kind of already knows they're going to the Pacific Theater. They've had these guys out training in the desert the entire time. It's just obvious they're gonna send them over to that tropical environment, and they're gonna have to go toe-to-toe with the Japanese, which is horrifying. So they all get to the train yard. Nobody tells them shit. They still don't know where they're going. Everybody's just kind of like, we're going to Japan. We've got to be going to Japan, right? They get in the train. Nobody tells them where they're going. And they're like, well, fuck it. I guess we'll know in a second when the train starts moving east or west. Because obviously if we're going to the west, we're going...
Anyone in here who served and deployed, did you know where you were going before you deployed? I knew what country I was going to. They didn't tell me what part of the country I was going to be in. They didn't tell me, they didn't give me a location, they didn't give me coordinates, they didn't even tell me like on Google Maps or nothing. They just said, you're going to this country and you'll know exactly what part of the country when your helicopter lands there. I was like, oh, okay.
We're going to the Pacific Theater. If we're going to the east, we're going over to Europe. And sure enough, the train starts heading to the east coast. These boys are headed over to the European theater in winter, despite the fact that they're acclimated to living in a desert, which, I mean, it makes sense if you don't think about it. So the 99th Infantry Division gets over to Europe. They end up manning the Siegfried Line. The entire Siegfried Line on the Allied side is pretty sparsely defended. They're not anticipating the Germans are going to launch a counteroffensive and attack, so they're just kind of spread out, maintaining the...
It's 18, but the title says 22. Did they pick up some extra homies along the way that were like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'll help you? Maybe.
area. They're going to let winter do some of the work for them because it's November in 1944. Let the Germans go in there, freeze their ass off. The Red Army's attacking them from the other front. Like, let's just wait a minute and chill is more or less a strategy. So a lot of the infantry guys on that front aren't doing a whole lot other than just securing that front line. But Bouck and the INR platoon are scouts. They're going to be going ahead and they're going to be actually scouting out the Siegfried Line. They're going to be making maps, getting spots of where all the bunkers are, where all the booby traps are, all the minefields, gathering all the intel, and trying to capture German scouts and intelligence along the way. Now, because the INR platoon is going to be sneaking up on the enemy front lines trying to gather reconnaissance, their job is a little bit more dangerous, so Bouck wants to give him and his men the best firepower they can possibly get, so he goes out to the mechanics and the engineers and asks them to make some modifications to the INR platoon's M1 carbines.
We need more firepower.
If you don't know, the M1 carbine is semi-automatic and it has a 15-round magazine, so they go and they end up welding 2 magazines together to make a bunch of 30-round magazines, and then they modify the sears inside of the carbines to make them fully automatic. So now the INR platoon is going to be running around the woods in Germany with what amounts to a bunch of submachine guns.
Yeah.
By December 1944, they're going out, they're doing missions, and one of the first missions they wanted to
and
take
bro,
private...
let me just tell you, in these times, having fully automatic capabilities is... It is battle changing. That's the best way I can put it.
Leopold with them. Now, Private Leopold in the INR platoon is unique because he was actually from Germany. His family fled when the Nazis came to power because they were Jewish. So Private Leopold is extremely valuable because not only does he speak German, but he speaks German in a German accent. It's his native tongue. So he's going to be able to overhear Germans if they get close enough to spy on them,
or he can infiltrate.
If they capture one, he's going to be able to interrogate them. It's a very valuable asset to have.
No, never mind. That's a stupid idea. Not infiltrate, because then you lose your only way of translating. But if worse came to worse on like some crazy situation type shit, he could infiltrate. That's fantastic. That's cool as shit.
Problem is he's Jewish and he's from Germany. If he gets captured by the Nazis, it's
dead.
Pretty much a death sentence right out of the gate.
But...
And he's already being a scout, like the most forward infantry unit available, so his chances of being caught are
exponentially
higher than virtually anybody else's. So he's not super keen on going out on missions unless he's feeling like he's at 100%. And on this particular day, he's sick and he's got a really bad cough. So Leopold goes to the chain of command and he's like, hey, I've got this really bad cough. I'm a scout. We're trying to like sneak up on the enemy. Maybe me coughing the entire time isn't going to work out that great. Also, I'd rather not get caught because I'm Jewish. What do you think? Can I sit this mission out? And the chain of command's like,
I mean, it's extra bad because you're Jewish, but at the same time, if you're just an American period or an Allied force period, it's not looking good for you regardless if you get caught by the Germans. And I know that in a lot of cases, Germans would have POW camps. There was a lot of times where they wouldn't kill you. They would just jail you. But I mean, some of those people that were captured and jailed that didn't get executed, they still died in those prisons. A lot of them did. So, I mean, it's pretty bad regardless. But yeah, it's extra bad because you most definitely are Jewish. Yeah.
I mean, you speak German, right? You'll cough in a German accent. It'll be fine.
Uh-oh. You okay there, Dennis?
So Leopold's like, fuck, okay, I guess. So he goes out on this mission, immediately starts coughing the entire time. Bouck is like, Leopold, shut the fuck up. Start eating snow. So Leopold spends the entire mission just eating snow to calm his throat down so he's not coughing. Ends up working great.
Does it? I was about to ask. That kind of sounds like bullshit. That kind of sounds like rub some dirt on it. That shit don't work at all. It did work. Okay. I didn't know that was a thing. All right.
Together, and they come across a dead German soldier's body. At first, they're worried that it's a booby trap, so they sit there, they watch it for a while.
Where would they know he's Jewish from? I don't know, man. Like, I've seen plenty of times where maybe it's fake Hollywood bullshit, but I've seen in some films and in like some where like they could just tell, right, just by looking at you. If it's a lot of times that they couldn't tell that you were Jewish, they could just tell that you weren't German, I feel. And so, yeah, it's just extra dangerous for him, because even though he can speak the language and he has the accent and everything, it's just like, how do I put it? maybe that's the case. Some of them could probably just see it written all over you, all over your face, your facial features, maybe the thickness of your eyebrows, maybe your hair, maybe just like facial features, man. Also, the pronunciation of certain words. Yes, even though you speak the language, like there's just certain nuances with the language that, you know what I'm saying, that only like a full 100% thoroughbred German would know, like certain ways of speaking, certain lingos, certain, like, it's a different dialect, really. Just certain of those things. You could give yourself away fairly easily, I feel, which is why there's so much tension with Leopold, really, for the most. And I get it, right? You're putting yourself in a lot of, like, you're already putting yourself in danger, but because of what you are, the danger is amplified, and I get it.
Of the body, and then get as far away as they can before pulling it like 6 to 8 feet just to make sure it's not booby trapped with like a grenade underneath it or something. And it's not. So they go, they search the body, they find an ID card, they find out what unit this guy's from, and they find some other intel on him. This is the first successful mission of the INR platoon. A couple days after that, they go out on another patrol. They end up running into a German patrol, and then they immediately outgun them using their modified M1 carbines, and they end up wiping out the entire German patrol. So things are going great. The INR platoon is performing exactly how they trained to perform. They're going out, they're scouting, they're doing their job, they're getting it done. And what is...
And all that, not having trained a single fucking day for this environment, right? They're in the cold right now, and they trained for an entire year for heat, jungle, humidity, shit like that. So that just adds to the legend of these men, their adaptability.
What does the military do when things aren't broken? That's right, we fix them anyways. You know what would be cool if the INR platoon, the intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, rather than going out and gathering intelligence and performing reconnaissance, what if we set them up in static fighting positions and ordered them to hold a point like every other infantry company on the planet?
It's a great idea, right?
It's a terrible idea.
On December 10th, Bouck's commanding officer rolls up and is like, hey, get in the Jeep. He drives Bouck out, and he drives him to this little tiny village of like 15 houses and a cafe called Lanzerath. And Lanzerath has this main road running right through the top of it. Inside of Lanzerath, there's like 50 anti-tank soldiers and then like 4 forward observers, you know, the guys that call in the artillery. And then right on the other side of the town, there's this ridge with a wood line. And the commander's like, hey, I want you and your 18 guys to go ahead and hold this ridge on this wood line. We can't lose this town on the off chance that the Germans do attack, because this would be the best route for a bunch of tanks to come storming through. So Bouck and the INR platoon are not excited about this. This is not what they trained to do. It's not really their job. They don't have the training. And when you don't have the training, you get to do the most terrifying thing in the military. You get to wing it, and Bouck is going to do just that. So obviously they're about to start stealing shit. Sorry, I mean strategically.
Oh, he moved to a new house. Oh, okay. I thought he just moved to a different part of the existing house he was in.
Transferring equipment to an alternate location.
The finest merchandise this side of the River Jordan on sale today. Come on down.
And the best way to go about that this time is to not actually steal it. It's actually to trade stuff that they've already stolen. I mean, acquired. You see, because the INR platoon was one of the only units actually going out scouting and engaging German scouts, they were also some of the only men on the Western Front at this point in time that had gathered memorabilia, if you will. And let's face it, everybody wants a good souvenir, right? Including supply sergeants. So Bouck gathers up all their memorabilia, goes out to the supply sergeants. He ends up trading it. He ends up getting several Browning automatic rifles, a 30 caliber machine gun, and then he ends up trading some pretty substantial pieces of memorabilia and gets a Jeep that he then convinces the mechanics to weld tank plate armor onto and mount a 50 caliber machine gun on top of, and he drives that out to Lanzerath. So the INR platoon gets all their new equipment. They head out to Lanzerath. There was a unit that was already there that had already dug.
If only it actually worked that way in today's military. Or if only it still worked that way.
Foxholes, but their foxholes kind of sucked. They weren't very deep, so the INR platoon gets to work. They dig the foxholes way deeper. They go out in the woods and they cut down a bunch of 4 to 5 inch thick trees. They build it up on top and they cover the foxholes with wood as well. They camouflage the holy hell out of everything. They even dig a foxhole for the Jeep with a ramp to drive down into, so it has its own fortified fighting position. So while that's going on, Bouck goes down into town in Lanzerath. He wants to figure out everything that's going on. He wants to talk with the FOs, talk with the anti-tank guys, just get everything under control and know what's going on, right? He gets there, kind of a giant shit show. They've clearly been here for a while and there's not a whole lot going on. There's a family in town called the Schur family, and they're actually making hot food for all the Americans in exchange for chocolate and cigarettes. Now, the Schur family has already got their 25-year-old daughter sleeping in bed with the parents just so she stays away from all the American soldiers, and all the American soldiers have made her 16-year-old brother Adolf basically their mascot. He now speaks English, but only profanity. So with that, he goes back up to camp in his fortified fighting position, and they just kind of wait. They're there just making sure that the Germans don't attack, essentially, freezing their ass off. They've got a little heating shack. They're taking turns, rotating in and out, warming up, sleeping, eating food, and this goes on for a couple of days. By December 13th, this new guy rolls into town, some Belgian guy acting kind of weird, so they, stop him. They talk to him. They're like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm bringing my cousin some shoes. And they're like, right. That's a fucking spy. And they're like debating on what to do with this guy. They can't really do shit with him, so they just end up letting him go. And from there, shit just gets weird. There's this like one corner of the area that they're overlooking with their fields of fire that they end up calling the creepy corner because every single night something weird is going on over there, right? There's noises and nobody can see shit and they don't know what's going on over there. And eventually one night they're manning the positions and they hear snow, like freshly frozen snow. You know how when you step on it, it kind of got this big crunch sound as it breaks through. They hear that getting closer and closer and closer, and eventually they just open fire on it because it has to be someone or something coming right at them. And after they open fire, it's just quiet. And that was it for the rest of the night. They can hear some grumbling off in the distance, but nothing else ever came. The next morning, they go out and they investigate, and it was a dog that they had ended up shooting, but it was clearly a military-trained dog, but it was by itself.
Hey, look at us. Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
So that's weird. And then they adventure further past that, like 150.
That is weird, man. Just like walking, that's creepy ass dog. That dog was gathering intel. That was a spy dog. 200
yards, and then there's like ski tracks all over the place. And they're like, what the fuck is going on? So then the whole day...
It's a smart dog, really. I don't know.
Goes by, everything's seeming kind of normal. A Jeep shows up to resupply them with more food, and this time around, they all got a liquor ration, which is like immediately a red flag. Like they're only giving out liquor rations when they're about to ask us to do some dumb shit or something horrible is about to happen, okay? It's like getting a steak and lobster dinner. It's gonna happen right before somebody's about to die. They're not telling us something and we need to figure out what it is. But then somebody's like, hold on, maybe it's not that bad. Lieutenant Bouck actually turns 21 in 2 days on the 17th. So maybe it's so we can all have a party and get LT drunk.
Yeah. No. Sorry. Something bad's definitely gonna happen. Military don't give a fuck about your birthday.
Then more creepy noises all night long. That morning, a deer walks into camp. Naturally, they shoot it with a machine gun. They end up eating it. Then normal day, seems like, okay? Night of the 15th. More creepy noises all night long. But tonight the noises are different. Off in the distance, it almost sounds like there's engines running. So Lieutenant Bouck knows something's up.
Oh, bro, y'all are slowly but surely. I feel it. I feel it in my knee. Y'all are slowly but surely getting surrounded. You hear shit, right? You can't see it. You hear footsteps, dog. You hear noises. Can't really pinpoint what it is. You know what it is? I feel like it's this. I feel like there's something closing in on you. Slowly. 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 And then when the camera pans out, you're fully surrounded.
So he has all the guys up. They're all alert. They're all there. And then on the day of the 16th at 5:30 a.m., they start getting hit with a ton of artillery fire right on top of them. At this point, the whole platoon and Lieutenant Bouck are all shitting their pants. I mean, they've had a couple of firefights off in the woods with like 2 or 3 Germans, but this time it's completely different. It feels like they're in the shit. It feels like they're at D-Day taking a ton of artillery fire. The rounds that are getting shot towards them are set to airburst, so they're blowing up in the tree line before they hit the ground, and it's just sending shards of tree splinters everywhere. So the entire INR platoon is just hiding inside their foxholes, and at this point, everybody's pretty fucking happy that Lieutenant Bouck made everybody cut down trees and put roofs over their foxholes, because now it's gonna take a direct hit to take anybody out. The artillery barrage just keeps coming and coming and more, and it gets to the point that like the adrenaline wears off, and it just gets tiresome. Like the men are in their foxholes hiding and they're like, Okay, you guys are gonna attack us. We get it. Quit launching artillery and just come get us already. But the artillery just keeps coming. Like, it feels like it takes an entire day for this artillery to finally stop. Once the artillery fire finally stops, Lieutenant Bouck gets out of his foxhole to assess the situation. He looks down on Lanzerath and realizes all this artillery fire has only been hitting their wood line right on top of them and the one corner of Lanzerath where those 4 forward observers were, which means Belgian shoe guy was definitely a spy that fucked him over. And right as Bouck is putting that together, the 55 anti-tank guys are loading up in their Jeeps and they are peeling off, just straight up leaving. Bouck is obviously kind of pissed off that he didn't give him a heads up. I mean, they ran a phone line out to him, so they had a direct line of communication, but the artillery barrage must have taken it out. In fact, the artillery barrage has taken out all their phone lines, so now all they have is radio. So Bouck radios over to this anti-tank unit and they're like, yeah, we got orders to go over to this next town. That's where we're headed. At which point Bouck is like, okay, well, I can't do anything without you guys. Like, I have a 50 caliber machine gun and some small arms. If they roll up with a tank, we're done. We can't do anything. No. So Bouck gets on the radio with HQ, tells them the same thing. Hey, the 55 anti-tank guys left. We have nothing that can combat a tank. Do you want us to retreat back to a different position too? What do you want us to do? And Bouck is ordered to hold his position at all costs. Right around this time, the 4 forward observers that were down in town come up the hill. They're going to be...
I know that's kind of like annoying to hear, but surely there's help on the way, right? Right? Right?
Joining forces with the INR platoon because their position got absolutely pounded by artillery. So it is now Lieutenant Bouck, the INR platoon, and 4 forward observers for a total of 22 men defending...
That's the extra bodies, the forward observers. Okay. Man, that fucking... Those dudes that left, man, y'all are some turds. Y'all can just, like, stick around and help? I would. That's a free firefight. That's a free firefight, man. Just to get excited about these things, but...
Lanzerath and the road running through it. So the forward observers get settled into their new fighting positions, and as soon as that happens, hundreds of German soldiers descend upon Lanzerath. I mean, a shit ton. Luckily, it's very clear that these guys are not moving tactically. They're kind of just moseying through the town. They're not...
That's because they think that they think that their barrage of artillery killed everyone or made everyone flee. So they're just like, you know, walking down the street, just chilling, which is perfect.
Not expecting any resistance. They think that the Americans have either been taken out by that artillery barrage or that they all retreated after the fact. But as they start getting closer and closer to the ridge where the INR platoon is, Bouck finally makes out these aren't just German soldiers, these are German paratroopers carrying the new FG-42 assault rifle. Great.
Which can match their firepower, I think.
So not only are they outnumbered like 50-1, but these are also an elite infantry unit that have fancy new weapons. Perfect. In reality, and luckily for Bouck, a lot of these paratroopers were new recruits and weren't quite trained up to the paratrooper standard that the Germans had previously had earlier in the war, but Bouck doesn't know that, and he's still kind of shitting his pants about it. And honestly, it really doesn't matter that much because even with that being said, it's still 500 to 22. So seeing how vastly outnumbered they are, Lieutenant Bouck is like, okay, it's my turn to call in artillery fire. He hops on the radio, he calls for fire right on top of this massive formation of Germans, and they radio back and tell him, sorry, you're outside of the priority zone. We're taking attack from all...
I see 500 Germans. What more do you need as far as priority? Oh my god. Ugh.
All over the place, and you're just not a big priority right now, so you're just gonna have to live without it.
What do you mean? That... You mean to tell me? What military would miss out on the opportunity to simultaneously, in one fell swoop, wipe out 500 soldiers in one go? Apparently us. Apparently us. Holy shit.
Now, Bouck doesn't say it over the radio, obviously, but at this point, he's just kind of like, so let me get this straight. I need to hold this ground at all costs because it's of vital importance, but it's also not vitally...
It's so important, but you won't send anyone to... Yeah, go fuck yourself. That's, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing.
Important enough for you to throw some artillery fire my way to help me out in my 22 to 500 battle. Okay, great, perfect. You know what? I still have the element of surprise, so I've got that going for me at the very least. And as soon as he has that thought, he sets the radio down and one of his INR platoon guys goes, sir, you might want to look at this. He turns, looks down at Lanzerath, and there's a German officer talking to a young blonde girl, and the young blonde girl is pointing directly at them. At which point Bouck is like, fuck. And then immediately all the Germans scatter and take cover. So now he has nothing, and it's just
That just feels like a scene straight out of the movie. Everything that's happened up to this point just feels like a scene straight out of the movie. Just like bad news after bad news after bad news. Because it started with like, oh, hey, the Germans are coming. Wait, where the fuck are you guys going? I guess they're gone. Hey, can I get some cover fire? No? Fuck me? Okay. That girl just told on us. Great. That's shit.
Straight up 22 to 500.
What are you thinking? I think we're about fixing to get into a pretty good gunfight.
This is one of those
Moments later, the Germans just bum rush.
This is one of those situations where you make right with whoever it is that you pray to, and you say your goodbyes in your own head, and then that's it. You ride. That you die here. That's at least that's the thought. That's my thought. Anyways, like this is gonna be it. So let's make the most of it. Kill as many as I can.
The hill that the INR platoon are on top of. About midway up this hill, there's this barbed wire fence. They didn't put it up. It'd been there forever. But none of the Germans even make it there. The INR platoon is just picking them off one by one. Remember, every single one of them is an expert marksman. And these guys are just out in the open, running up a hill. They don't stand a chance. The INR platoon ends up driving the Germans back. Obviously, they fall back. They regroup. Bouck is going from foxhole to foxhole, redistributing ammunition, checking on all of his guys. Everybody's okay. They've repelled the first wave of the Germans. They're probably going to get flanked now. There's nobody out there. If they get flanked, they're screwed. At this point, it feels like they've been awake for 3 days, but in reality, it's only like 9 o'clock in the morning. And like I said,
that's what adrenaline does to you. And once that adrenaline wears off, man, oh, that shit's like a drug. You crash. You crash when that adrenaline wears off, man.
They're just sitting there waiting for this flank to come. They're just going to fight till the bitter end. That's all they can really do. And they sit there and they wait and they wait. And minutes turn into hours, and then the German...
Because adrenaline, like sometimes in a firefight, adrenaline won't last you the whole firefight sometimes. And in this case, they've been in this situation for a hot minute. So that initial adrenaline probably wore off after the artillery strikes. And right here, they're just,
launch another attack at 11 a.m., but they're not flanking them. They're using the same strategy. They're just running up the hill, trying to run through machine gun fire like it's World War I. At this point, Bouck is like, well, this is fantastic news. Finally, somebody's given me and the INR platoon a break, and it turns out it's the enemy. So they mow them down again, push them back again. Shortly after that, a couple of Germans approach under a white flag. Bouck goes up there to meet them. The Germans just want to be able to scoop up some of their dead and wounded off the side of this ridge, and Bouck is like, sure, go ahead, you do that. We won't fire on you. Go ahead, get your guys. Bouck retreats, hoping that when he's captured, they're going to extend him the same goodwill. So the medics come out. They scoop up all the medics under the hill. The INR platoon lets them do it, just as Bouck said they would. Everything's fine and dandy, and Bouck is kind of thinking to himself, like, all right, I have the high ground. I have fortified machine gun positions. They've figured it out after the first two runs.
Yeah,
they're definitely not going to try a full frontal assault where I have the high ground again.
Don't try it. High ground.
But they don't do it again, do they? Do they? Do they?
German stormtroopers, I mean the paratroopers, are like...
You underestimate my power!
At 1 p.m., they launch a full frontal assault for a third time. And predictably so, they got the exact same results they got the first two times. The INR platoon guys described it as shooting clay pigeons at the state fair.
Oh my god, dude.
High ground. Wait, are you robbing me?
Then the same thing happens. The Germans fall back, they regroup. 3 p.m., they launch another full frontal attack. They get repelled again, except during this attack, they sent out so many men that the 50 caliber machine gun actually got burnt up because they were having to run it so hard to mow down so many Germans. In addition to that, they're also
I'm losing brain cells.
out of ammunition for the BARs, and Bouck's radio got shot in the middle of this firefight, so now they have no communication whatsoever. So now Bouck's making all the decisions. They've held this position longer than anybody could have ever expected them to. It's time to get the fuck out of here. So he goes, they sabotage all the Jeeps, and as soon as it gets dark out, they're gonna slip away into the forest at night and make their way back to headquarters on foot. Now that sounds a little bit crazy, like why wouldn't you want to drive? But in reality, there's probably Germans all over the road, and this is the INR platoon. That's their whole MO, is sneaking around around in the
Yeah.
woods and going unnoticed, this is their best shot at getting out of this. So they sabotage the jeeps, they get ready to step off, and right at dusk as they're about to leave, the Germans attack them from their flank. They get into a firefight, but the INR platoon runs completely out of ammunition.
I mean, it's about time they fucking pulled their heads out of their asses. I mean, I feel like I would have learned after just the first time, right? Jesus. 4 waves. 4 waves. Lord.
And they get overrun by the Germans.
And for some way, somehow, some reason, that regime would have you believe that they were somehow superior. 4 waves. Fail. Let's do it again. Fail. Let's do it again. Fail. Let's do it again. And after 4 failures and hundreds of casualties, and somehow, some way, that regime tried to convince people that they were superior. No, I think you mean special, man. Like in the term of either way too many or not enough chromosomes, bro. That just like, that's... I'm gonna say it. That's retarded.
Eventually, the Germans just roll up to the foxholes and they yell down, "You can come out or we're gonna send a grenade in." So foxhole by foxhole, the entire INR platoon surrenders. And as they come out, they're all shot up, blown up. They're all hit with shrapnel, gunshot wounds. Bouck took a bullet to the leg. Nobody's doing that great. But with the exception of one forward observer...
Doesn't matter. We embarrassed you on a massive scale and the story is still being told years on. Even after it. So, who was the actual loser here? The Germans. The Germans, bro. L for this battle, bro. Hard L. Capital, okay? L. Man. Doesn't matter that you captured them. They embarrassed you on a massive scale. And on top of that, you went full fucking retard. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times in a fucking row. L, you lost this. I hate to tell you.
By the name of Billy Queen, they're all still alive, which is pretty incredible for a 22 to 500 firefight.
Yeah.
So the Germans get the entire INR platoon and the 3 remaining FOs all lined up, and it becomes very apparent that the Germans are gonna kill them. They're standing there with a machine gun, and right as this guy is about to let fire with this machine gun, a German officer comes running up the hill screaming, and next thing they know, the entire INR platoon is getting escorted down this hill into Lanzerath. Next thing they know, they're all getting funneled into the cafe in Lanzerath. The Germans are digging through their pockets, they're confiscating anything that's good, and the Germans confiscate all the cigarettes, and as they take all the cigarettes, they walk around and give the Americans one last cigarette, like, okay, maybe they are still gonna kill us. I have no idea what's going on. Either way, now they're all just sitting in the cafe, having their last cigarette, blown up, bleeding with bullet holes in them, and it's just dead quiet. Bouck said the loudest thing in that room was the second hand on the cuckoo clock in the corner, and it was ungodly loud. It was so quiet that in between the noises of the second hand on that cuckoo clock, Bouck could actually hear the Germans, the superior master race, across town in their aid stations screaming from their injuries. Meanwhile, him and all of his men are just sitting in the cafe, dead quiet, stone face, having a cigarette. That's like great. The biggest cool guy moment ever. Is. So the INR platoon finishes their last cigarette, and then they just sit there, and they sit there, and they sit there, and they sit there, and then eventually Bouck is just trying to think to himself over that annoying-ass cuckoo clock in the corner, and he just starts to get really down. He's not happy with how things went, right? He spent 6 years of his life training for this, and he goes into combat, and the first time he really goes into combat, he gets the best guys that the 99th Infantry had to offer. They let him pick the best of the best, and he took them into battle, and in one day, he got all of them captured and most likely killed.
No, man. You should probably not be that hard on yourself. Jesus. No. Leave it up to a fantastic soldier to shoulder the blame of something that's not even his fault, his doing, or anything like that. One, they didn't even train to be in this area. They didn't even train to be in this environment. And then they get here with 18 men. They get abandoned by a group that should have helped them. Air support tells them to fuck off. He has to fend for himself and lead his men against 500. You successfully do that, and you're still sitting here down on yourself? Come on, man. No. I don't think so. I don't believe so.
And it's all on him. Or at least that's how he felt at the time. And
you shouldn't feel like that at all. I mean, I can understand why you probably feel that way, but There was just more shit at play here besides just you, and you just made the best out of a shitty situation. Should try to, I don't like when soldiers do this, man. They shoulder the responsibility, the load, the blame, the for something that they couldn't even predict, help, or stop. You know what I'm saying? Like,
continues to sit there for hours, just loathing himself in the silence and the noise of that fucking cuckoo clock in the corner that just keeps ticking and ticking and ticking. And he's just sitting there and he's sitting there, and then the fucking bird comes out again and honks, and it's 10 p.m. And suddenly he has this memory of when he was 14 years old and his Aunt Mildred, who used to read palms, she read his palm when he was 14, and she told him that if he lived to be 21, he'd have a long, happy life. And he's about 2 hours away from turning 21. At this point, he can't believe that this is the dumb shit that he's thinking about, but that's what he's thinking about. So he sits there and he waits, and more time passes and more time passes, and sure enough, midnight hits, and suddenly he just feels this relief, like, can't get me now. I'm gonna make it. And not a minute later, some high-ranking German officer comes storming into the cafe, yelling at all the other Germans. This guy's not like all the other German military guys around here. He's not standard German military. This guy's SS. He's dressed from head to toe in leather. He's got the German dead skull on his hat. He's got the Knight's Iron Cross around his neck, the second highest award for valor in the German military. This dude is super important, and he is super fucking pissed off right now. Now, Bouck doesn't know it at the time, but this SS officer is yelling at all these other German officers like, why are you guys stopped? Why aren't you continuing to advance? We're on a very strict timetable. What the fuck is going on?
Sir, they kicked our ass. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 fucking times, man. We really did try. Fuck you want from me? We gave it our best shot. Look at them. They don't even give a shit. They're just over there smoking cigarettes. What do you want from me?
So these German officers explain to this SS guy, like, hey, there's a massive American army in this wood line. They've got tanks. They've got machine guns. We're not going to go fight them at night. They've been fucking us up all day long. We finally captured their forward scout element. So they wait.
Oh, but unbeknownst to them, it's just them. I think. I'm almost pretty sure. Whatever these officers are telling this really angry German officer, I don't think that's true. I think they're imagining things. I think they got their ass whooped so hard that they think that there's an army, when in reality, it's just the 18 guys that are sitting across from you. That's who fucked you up. You're thinking there's a bigger element? Bruh, that is the element.
Until there's enough light to actually go outside. Like 4 a.m., the Germans send out a bunch of scouts into the wood line. They don't find anything because there's nothing there to find, and they have to come to the realization
that y'all got fucked up by 18 guys, and they're sitting right there in that cafe. That is fucking hilarious.
22 dudes with small arms have been fucking them up for the past 22 hours, and they're all incredibly embarrassed. So the Germans take off, hightailing it down this road, half tracks, tanks, and then Lyle, Bouck, and the rest of the INR platoon are all getting sent to POW camps. Unfortunately, because Bouck is an officer, he's going to get separated from the rest of the guys, and they're going to separate POW camps. From here, you guys know the drill. POW camp is absolutely horrible, the worst possible thing to have to live through. He's starved to death. There's diseases, living in close proximity with other sick people, and as the war progresses, at one point there is actually a prison break. He ends up getting recaptured, stuck back into a POW camp, and as the war continues to progress, for some reason they keep moving him from POW camp to POW camp, and he doesn't know it at the time, but what's actually happening is the Germans are losing the war, and all the German POW camps on the eastern half of Europe are starting to move all their POWs and themselves to the west.
A more concentrated place, right?
Western side, because if these Germans are going to have to surrender to an allied force, they absolutely want to surrender to the Americans, the British, and the Canadians, because if they surrender to them, it's a court date, and if they surrender to the Red Army, it's going to be an execution.
Yeah.
His final POW camp is in Moosburg, and while he's there, a bunch of SS teenagers, like radicalized 16, 17, 18-year-olds with submachine guns that have German officer rank, roll into this POW camp, and they want to execute all the POWs, including Bouck, at which point the normal German army, the Wehrmacht, are like, no, you're not executing executing all the prisoners, those are our bargaining chips to turn over to the Allies so we don't get killed.
Yeah.
So absolutely not. And there's this huge fight between the SS and the Wehrmacht, which became more and more common as the war progressed. And ultimately, the Wehrmacht won that argument, and they ended up keeping everybody alive. So Bouck
yeah, because the Wehrmacht, they probably have more seasoned, older, veteran officers in their ranks. And what Fat Electrician just said, these were a whole bunch of just fucking 16, 17-year-old little shits. A little bit too big for their britches. Probably.
got pretty lucky on that one. From there, Lyle Bouck remains at that POW camp till the end of World War II. When he is finally released, he weighs 114 pounds and has contracted hepatitis. He is essentially on his deathbed, and he spends months in the hospital. Thankfully, Lyle Bouck does end up recovering. He makes it back home, and from there, he's like, what, 22 at this point? So he's trying to figure out what he wants to do with the rest of his life, and he's like, I mean, I've already dedicated so much of my time to being in the military. Maybe I should just go back and be full-time Army, and he's considering doing that, and then the paperwork comes through, and the Army fucked him over on his back pay and his leave that he had accrued while he was a POW, and he, challenged him on it, and he's like, hey, you did my back pay wrong. You paid me out as a supply NCO when I was actually an officer in the infantry in combat the entire time and serving as a POW. I'd like to be paid as an officer, not as an NCO. And the Army's like, don't care, fuck off. So he's like furious, like the Army has done nothing but treat this guy poorly, right? Like couldn't get artillery fire when he needed it, can't get back pay, and he's just like, screw this, I'm done with the Army. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. Understandably so from his point of view. From there, he kind of hangs around town, meets his high school sweetheart, Lucy, ends up marrying her, trying to decide what he wants to do for a career. And one of the things that helped him recover from all his injuries from the war was actually a chiropractor. So that inspires him to go off and become a chiropractor himself. And from there, he just kind of gets to live happily ever after, just like his aunt.
And even in these times, I feel like you would make more money as a chiropractor than you would in the military. I feel like they make good money, right? I think they do.
Mildred predicted when she read his palm. For 20 years, he never talked about what he did during World War II. Why would he? He thought he was a failure. He thought that he got given the chance to assemble the best men the 99th Infantry Division had to offer, and he led them into battle.
And it's funny because, like, the people that said no to him on the whole back pay thing probably had no earthly idea of what he did in combat and why he was even a POW to begin with. Which is besides the point. They shouldn't even have to know. This guy was a POW and he was a fucking officer. Give him what he's owed. Jesus.
And got them captured and served out the majority of his time in theater as a prisoner of war. It was nothing to brag about, or at least that's how he felt. So he never really talked about it. And then one day in 1965, he got a letter from one of his men. After 20 years, the United States government was finally putting out extensive volumes of what happened during World War II, and one of the volumes was dedicated to this major German offensive in 1944, December 16th, 1944 specifically, called the Battle of the Bulge. Adolf Hitler had ordered a massive blitzkrieg-style offensive where they were going to split the American and British forces in half by seizing Antwerp, cutting off the supplies, crushing the British and the Canadians, and forcing the Americans to sign a peace treaty. In order for this plan to have any success, it was critical that they had the element of surprise, and because of that, German High Command in the days leading up to the Battle of the Bulge offensive ordered that none of the German scouts were to go out without a German scout dog that was specifically trained to lead the scouts by 100 yards. That way, none of them got caught.
I kind of figured. That is a smart dog, man. Very smart dog. Think about it. That dog was literally creeping. They said they heard footsteps, and they heard the footsteps getting closer and closer, which means the dog is doing this. I've seen dogs do that, mainly like herd dogs, herding dogs, like what are those dogs that herd like sheep and shit? They're super smart, bro, and they like get really low, like a really low profile, and they'll creep. And damn, yeah. So 100 meters in front of the element, I knew that they were close, and that's what I said, bro. Like y'all literally have people. I said you were like literally getting surrounded, but you have people getting closer, closer, and closer. You keep hearing shit. That's because there's something there. Anyways.
Because if a single scout got caught and got interrogated and gave away this
Australian Shepherd, is that what it is? Man, I've seen those dogs do their thing, and it's so impressive. I can't look away when I see those dogs. They get like really low to the ground, and they're herding and they're corralling the The farm animals and shit. It's like the coolest thing ever. Super smart.
Battle strategy, it would ruin the entire thing. That's the dog that they shot on December 13th. And that also explains all the ski marks and everything else hundreds of yards behind the dog. The artillery barrage that they survived before the paratroopers attacked, that was the largest artillery barrage of World War II, with over 1,600 artillery pieces firing on the American front for over 90 minutes. That pissed off SS officer that showed up at the cafe at midnight, that was Joachim Peiper, the commander of the 1st Panzer Division. The 1st Panzer Division...
God, he just looks like a douchebag, doesn't he?
Artillery barrage of World War II, with over 1,600 artillery pieces firing on the American front for over 90 minutes. That pissed off SS officer that showed up at the cafe at midnight, that was
Just looks like a douchebag, doesn't he? If he were to be played in a movie, he'd be played by Michael Fassbender. That's the face I see when I look at him. You know, the guy that plays Magneto? Well, the younger version of Magneto, not the old version.
Joachim Peiper, the commander of the 1st Panzer Division. The 1st Panzer Division was the lead element of the 6th Panzer Army, which at this point in time was Germany's premier armored unit that was hand-selected by Hitler himself to have the most important role of the entire military operation. The 6th Panzer Army being
the most important role of the military, and you failed.
Comprised of almost 5,000 men and 600 vehicles, tanks, and armored half-tracks, was supposed to be the first element to cross the River Meuse and head straight to Antwerp to cut the Allied forces in half. They were the spearhead of this entire offensive, and
y'all got beat by 22 dudes. This was your most important mission. And not only did you not make it, you didn't even come close to making it, but you got stopped by 22 guys. What's that one meme of Yoda where he's like, how embarrassing.
Joachim Peiper's 1st Panzer Division was the tip of that spear, and the reason he was so pissed off that night was because the paratroopers getting stopped by the INR platoon created a traffic jam behind them that he was stuck in, and he was 18 hours behind schedule. This German attack was so hasty.
Yo, he got stuck in traffic. That's why he was so mad.
They weren't going to be able to rely on their own supply lines. They had to rely on capturing Allied supplies to be able to continue this attack, including fuel. And since they were 18 hours behind schedule, the Allies were able to adopt new defensive...
Reminds me of that one scene from I think it's Infinity War, where he's like, I need my brother back. And he's like, oh yeah. He does the thing. He's like, I've been falling for 30 minutes! Been stuck in traffic for 18 hours! 18 hours! What is the problem?
Not leave any supplies behind, and the entire 1st Panzer Division would run out of fuel. The weather would break, Allied planes would take the sky, they would attack, and the entire 1st Panzer Division would never cross the River Meuse. The INR platoon and 4 forward observers quite literally blunted the spear of the entire German offensive.
Yeah.
22 men stood in the pocket and stuffed the largest blitz the world has ever seen at the line of scrimmage.
That's crazy.
These 22 men may be responsible for changing the entire outcome of World War II, and at this point...
Yeah, because who knows what happens if the Germans actually succeed there.
In time, nobody really knew anything about it. Some of the military historians knew that something happened over there, but nobody knew what happened, and it's because...
I'm hoping that with all of this information of this battle coming to light over the years, can we get the names of the people that said no to Officer Bouck whenever he requested air support? And apparently this was such a pivotal battle. How is the Germans' spearhead offensive that could quite possibly turn the tide of the war ignored? How? That's the biggest question. This was so important, right? And it was so pivotal. And it was... But no help. No help. This one road that could decide a major part of the war. 22 guys. No air support. No cavalry. No reinforcements. No nothing. What the fuck were y'all doing during that time? What? What were y'all doing? Were you finger popping each other's buttholes? What were y'all doing? This guy had to do everything himself.
because Bouck and all of his men got captured after the war. There were no after-action reports. They never got around to filling out all those papers.
Well, have fun at the gym, 32. Hopefully we see you again tomorrow or the next day. We'll be live on Twitch tomorrow doing music, so if you got music, let me know. Put it in the Discord.
They just got sent to the hospital, got patched up, and got sent home. Nobody knew what actually happened. So Bouck, 20 years after the fact, writes into his old commanding officer, and then a couple of months later, he never hears anything back, but a silver star just shows up in the mail, only for him. And it's not really what he's looking for, because he figures the rest of his men probably feel the same way he did. They trained just as hard as he did. They went out, they got the same fight, and they ended up getting caught too. They probably feel just like he does, and he wants to make sure that he gets them the recognition. He wants to be the good leader to his men that he never had. For years, he writes letters and petitions and does interviews and talks to journalists about what his men did that day. And for years, nothing really happens. And years turned into decades. And after 2 more decades, he finally breaks through. And in 1981, his men get the recognition they deserve. The Iron Heart Platoon would retroactively be awarded 4 Distinguished Service Crosses, 5 Silver
It's better late than never.
Stars, and 10 Bronze Stars with V device, and the entire platoon will be awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. If you don't know, a Presidential Unit Citation is the highest award a unit can receive, and it's usually given out to companies or battalions for major battles or something huge. It's very strange for an element as small as a platoon to be given this award. In fact, they were the only platoon of...
It's not strange. It makes sense. They were the only ones that were there. They were the only ones that could do anything. They were the only ones willing to do anything, because the rest of the rest of the Allied forces were doing fuck all, especially America, saying, nope, no artillery for you. We got better shit to do, even though this is a really, really, really important road for the Germans. I don't get it, bro. And then take them through the whole fucking process of waiting years for recognition? Fuck you.
World War II to be given the Presidential Unit Citation. And with that, they became the most decorated platoon of World War II. Thank you for watching. The best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out. It's pretty wild those guys changed the entire course of world history and didn't even know it till 20 years after the fact. I don't know. Maybe there's a message or something in that.
Yeah, that's something. Oh, fuck. That's...
Well, I felt I failed.
Why did you feel that you'd failed? You guys had done...
Well, we're in the hands of the enemy. I just thought we should have done something better, and we didn't, and I felt like what I did was a failure.
No, I don't see it
Do you
that
feel
way.
that way now?
Couldn't tell you.
He can't tell you because he's felt this way for so long that it's easier to just keep feeling that way than just completely change your whole train of thought. He's been feeling like a failure his whole damn life. And close to the end of his life, someone tells him, oh, by the way, man, you're actually a hero. And he's just like, I guess. Sure. I suppose, if you think so, I suppose. Get it? Maybe it's the case, and I don't know. Can we can we establish some kind of new committee for issuing out awards to service members? I don't know. Having this committee be comprised of Purple Heart recipients, veterans, right? People that have actually done the job, like. Is that the case? Because, like, I mean, something tells me that, like, these awards, they're just being handed out and they're being approved by people that probably have never seen a lick of fucking combat a day in their life. And if that's the case, that needs to change. We need to start giving these awards, and we need to start evaluating these awards by people who have actually received these awards, by people who have actually worked for these awards, for people that actually stepped foot in a place of battle to earn said award. Not some jackass looking at some piece of paper that's never deployed a day in their goddamn life, maybe has never even been in the service. He's just looking at a piece of paper and he just decides, nah, that's not worthy. Who the fuck are you? Right? So how do they do it? And that shit just needs to change. That shit fucking irks me. It irks me. It shouldn't take that damn long. It should never take that damn long. Funny enough, how they will send you to war in less than 30 seconds. Interesting how within 6 months I can already be deployed. Crazy, right? You go to basic training, you go to AIT, that's a couple months. You get to your unit, do some unit training, get to know your guys, get to know your first sergeant, your CO, boom, you're deployed. That's what happened to me. I deployed within 6 months of being in the service. So, like, it's funny how the military is so fast to deploy you. But when it comes to actually giving you recognition, dragging their fucking feet. When it comes to giving you anything after your service, dragging your fucking feet. And to that, I say, fuck you, man. That shit needs to change. It irks me. It irritates me. It puts me in a bad mood. Shouldn't take that goddamn long, and it shouldn't even, and this paperwork shouldn't even be evaluated or reviewed by someone that has never even been shot at before. Some fucking jackass paper pusher.